Genesee Valley Center is what I'll call an anomaly, and not because we're starting in a hybrid open-air part of the mall. For those of you who don't know, we are just outside of Flint, Michigan, arguably the worst city in Michigan, and that's saying something because Detroit exists. And while technically we still are in Flint, we aren't in Flint proper. We're in a charter township known as Flint Township. Yeah, because Michigan. Now, Flint is notorious for bad water and poverty, and yet here's a mall that still appears to be doing okay. Why don't we go step inside and have a look around? Genesee Valley Center got its start back in 1970 when it was developed by the Southfield-based company Shopping Centers Incorporated. Very original name. At the time, it was just a simple, straight corridor between two anchors, with Sears on one end and Hudson's on the other. The two would open ahead of the mall, while the mall itself opened officially in August of 1970. The mall caught traction quickly and gained notable tenants from the area, like Hamady Brothers Supermarkets, pardon if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Cunningham Drug, and a more recognizable name, Woolworth. As the mall rose in popularity, JCPenney would open up at the mall, bringing with it a new wing for more mall space. And as more tenants desired to move to the Genesee Valley Center, a mezzanine level would be constructed in the center court of 1987, bringing with it a food court, which we'll see in a moment. In 1993, Cunningham Drug would get demolished in favor of even more mall space, bringing with it a Mervyn's and Montgomery Ward. With this final enclosed expansion, the mall would total at 1.3 million square feet. This would make the Genesee Valley Center the largest regional mall north of Detroit. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, however, as Woolworth would close its doors as operations floundered in the U.S. Montgomery Ward wasn't that far behind in 2001, and Hudson's would turn over to Marshall Fields before Macy's would come to eat up Marshall Fields in 2006. And speaking of 2006, we would see the Montgomery Ward space get demolished that year in favor of the open-air portion of the mall that stands today. The outdoor village would obtain Barnes & Noble as its primary anchor. Okay, from my point of view, the mall just opened, so the food court tenants haven't gotten up and running just yet, but one thing I do notice is that half of the mezzanine is closed off. I believe in the business they call it foreshadowing. Mervyn's on the other side of the mall would suddenly close in 2006 as the company fled Michigan. The space would then turn over to Burlington Coat Factory, while the former Woolworth would get filled in by Steve & Barry's. Steve & Barry's would close in 2009 when the company filed for bankruptcy. I guess that rapid growth turned into a rapid shrink. Today, however, the space is now a shoe department encore. Although things were rocky, the mall still held strong as it got multiple store renovations throughout 2010, along with an H&M and a Planet Fitness. Burlington Coat Factory decided to depart the mall and relocate elsewhere in 2018. This was addressed at least, as a family fun center opened in its place. Sears, meanwhile, well, I think you know what happened. TLDR, they got seared in 2018 as well. And in 2019, a Forever 21 reportedly on site would close its doors for the last time as it faced bankruptcy. However, things would really begin to take a turn as Namdar Realty Group purchased the mall in December 2019. Namdar opted to terminate their contract with Allied Universal Security and switched to an in-house security detail as well as in-house housekeeping. Enter the terrible 20s, and while the mall did get through the other side, things would get weird. Be afraid when I say weird. Shortly after my visit in 2021, a water line would burst in the mall in December, forcing the mall to close its doors for repairs. The mall would reopen just a few days later. And even weirder, in 2022, Genesee Valley Center would close again in December and host very strange and sporadic operating hours for the rest of the month, from what the news articles say. Things got very muddy in that period. And while the mall reopened for 2023, last I heard, only the JCPenney and Macy's wings are open. Namdar, I ask, what is happening? Genesee Valley Center is a mall that leaves me confused more than anything else. It appears to be alive, but has an owner that is having problems with the mall, to put it nicely. And it is still going despite being near Flint, Michigan. It's difficult to gauge what the future holds for this 50-year-old geriatric mall, but I can't imagine it's going to be good, given the track record thus far. But maybe to keep the confusion going, Namdar or a future company can find a way to prove me wrong. Well, it's certainly a mall, that's for sure. It's not my favorite mall that I've seen, but it's not the ugliest thing I've seen either. Now, personally, I don't like how this mall is yellow enough to fit into Deus Ex Human Revolution, but to each their own, I guess. I do wish the fountains were on, however. Seriously, I could have made a joke about that using the water from Flint, but that's too easy. That and the things that happen in December are a bit more interesting, because I guess Santa has been putting coal in the mall's stockings. Now, I do want some testimonies from the locals. I've been told that parts of this mall are now closed off from the public. Is that true? So, for this being a curious case, we're outside of Flint at a mall that still has a decent amount of life left to it. Now it's showing signs of sliding, but what should be done to keep a mall like this alive? It's also huge, too. Not quite BFM big, but it's still pretty big. Would there still be a place for boutique shopping in Flint? If so, I'd think the current roster of stores is just fine. Sears does need to be replaced, however. Dead anchors can be a bad look over time and can sour perceptions. Should it be filled, or should it be demolished and replaced with something else? I don't really know what would be the best course of action for this place. And on top of that, the biggest problem this mall would have is being near Flint. I'm sure many of you already know what Flint is all about, especially from the stories about the water, but let's have a look at area vibes anyway and see what they have to say about Flint. Amenities and cost of living get an A+ and an A- respectively, but everything else is a big fat F. Crime, employment, housing, schools, even the user rating can't redeem this place. And its overall livability score is 51, which is terrible, especially when you compare it to Michigan's average and then the US's average. What I'm trying to say is that Flint is worse than Detroit. Not by much, but it is down there. Now, this mall is near Schwartz Creek, pardon if I'm mispronouncing that, and that place has an area vibe score of 71, which is much better and competitive with the national average. So there is money a little ways outside of Flint. Does this mall have a means to keep them coming back, though? Now, in my personal experience, I did see a decent number of crowds. The footage doesn't show it very well, I'll admit, but I don't just power walk them all in 15 minutes, contrary to popular belief. I do sit down, sometimes I'll go into stores to shop, and I still have pictures to take. Now, since I got into the mall just after it opened, the crowds did start off pretty light, in my point of view, but they got thicker and thicker over time. Now, the Sears wing was still pretty empty throughout, but I can recognize this mall still has an audience. But this was back in 2021. A lot can change in a year and a half, like that pipe bursting and the mysterious December closures. This is why I'm a bit afraid to make future predictions about this mall. It's because of left turns like that just completely throw me off. I'll admit though, the outdoor portion is pretty nice. Thanks for having me, Flint, and Flint Township. And until next time, this is Doomie Grunt wishing you and the Genesee Valley Center farewell and good luck whatever happens next. I'm just recording this so I can say I drove on Interstate 69. I don't know if it's Michigan, but it's not as nice as I thought it would be.